there's like an example here of like crucial considerations that you think one thing, and then you have a mission, and your like valuation of actions just changes massively, and then you have another and another and another, and this is like a reason to think that like thinking more about EA principles could really change what decision you make, and what decision you make could like lead to thousands of times more value than you actually end up doing, which is why I think it's important to think about these things. So that's why I think it's important. Now, why I think it's like takes time and effort to do this. So I think this is like one of the big kind of the workshop is that it takes like way longer than you think to learn about EA. I think my guess is that at least 100 hours is required to like start losing track and thinking more about EA. I've got like 3 reasons I'm going to go through why I think that might be, but like the main reason is just that it seems empirically, for the last like 6 months, I've done maybe 115 hours of like time in in-depth fellowship sessions, and I'm not even like close to understanding EA in any way that I'm happy with. And this is like, maybe these sessions weren't the most like condensed and like targeted of like time learning about EA, but there's still kind of towards this like 100-hour figure I kind of came up with. Now going into like other reasons why I think this might be. The first is that we need a lot of nuance. This like kind of what I touched on earlier with crucial considerations. Sorry, I can hear someone talking. Maybe mute yourself as well. This is kind of what I'm saying. Apparently I can mute everyone in the participants tab. I didn't mute everyone simultaneously, but it seems like maybe I can. Okay, I think I've muted everyone who joins from now on. I don't know whether I can mute everyone all at once. That's the best I can do. We need a lot of nuance, crucial considerations. We need to think really hard about these things. The example I gave, these crucial considerations built on top of each other, but there are like more complicated real world examples where there's like something from over here or something from over there that like comes together, and it's like really confusing. So sometimes simple questions can balloon out into like massive and complex problems. And this is like daunting, scary, but it's also interesting and exciting, and kind of speaks towards needing loads of time to think about these things. Another somewhat obvious sounding point, but people forget things. And maybe the weird thing is that people forget things more than you might think. Lots of people just like hear an EA kind of principle or idea for the first time, and then like a couple of weeks later have to apply it, and you can just even exist it. And really, as an organizer, you just need to like remind them, and that's really easy. But it definitely says that you need like loads of time thinking about these things. And I feel like I forget things all the time and get reminded by people. So this is super useful to me. The third point here is that things can be really easy to learn, but really hard to apply. This is kind of really true in EA Oxford, where we have a lot of philosophers and that's lots of groups. And I guess philosophers are like really trained to kind of try ideas and think about what someone would think with a certain mindset. And it's really hard to like stop using those tools when you're thinking about something that you actually want to use and apply. And so it's kind of easy to fall into the trap of thinking, EA tells me people should do X, rather than EA suggests that I want to do X if I want to make the world a better place. And yes, group leaders, getting ahead of myself a little bit with the tips. A great way to fix this is to just think about careers as much as possible in events and next steps people can take. So before we go on to these tips, actually, I think it's worth saying that that would just be justifying the workshop for 15 minutes. EA principles are important and they're hard, and we need to think carefully about how we learn them. And I have a completely different argument for this that links back to this like heavy-tailedness of different interventions we can take. So this is like a graph of like teaching methods that's done by someone completely outside of EA. That on like one axis we have like the effect size, and on another we have the cost. And like you can see from the 2 examples I highlighted that the range of like value you can get from like reasonable seeming interventions is just incredibly high. I think it's like 10,000 times more cost effective to give feedback in that example. And so it's like worth thinking really hard about how we teach things, and that applies to EA as well with learning EA. So this is like a completely different argument for maybe the same thing I've been going on about. So now let's actually think about how we can learn EA principles. I think the goal here is incredibly high fidelity, and by that I mean minimizing miscommunication and misunderstanding. So high fidelity is sending a text message, and low fidelity is like Chinese whispers. And I think I'll just like go through 4 possible tips for how you can do this, and then give you guys some examples. So tip 1, you don't need to reinvent the wheel. There are some great examples of useful framings and arguments for and against EA ideas all over the place. You can check the EA forum, EA Hub's resources, some of the 80,000 hours articles and their podcasts, and like other curriculums that group leaders have made are like just really useful for this. I think I linked a few of these in the doc if you haven't seen them before, and other people can like recommend them as well if they have some. And this is one of the reasons I think it's like really helpful as a group leader to work on like your understanding of EA, and to build your like toolkit of arguments for various positions. This is like a good time to plug the Indepth Fellowship again. That's a great place to learn about these arguments. And like I said, there are rounds in January and February, so you can follow the link I gave, and it's in the doc to learn more about that. Another thing that's really useful is being explicit about like how our learning is affecting us. This kind of comes back to the like philosophical framing that I'm concerned about. So a great way to think of this is like, instead of saying this article is interesting because it says X, you can say this article is interesting because it implies that we should do Y as effective altruists. I think that framing is really useful and can be done by group leaders as like an example in like any kind of event you're doing, and kind of like, it really helps to make the ideas stick more and also make them just like more applicable for people. The third point here is that it helps to focus on like effortful learning. Studies show that the more effort you put into learning a new idea, the better it sticks and the better you understand it. So we should focus on like putting loads of active effort into learning EA ideas. And to give an example of what I mean by effort, I think reading is not a particularly effortful way to learn. Answering questions about the reading is more effortful. Writing up key points and rephrasing them is even more effortful. And then writing questions and quizzing yourself a couple of days later is even more effortful. And as like the amount of effort increases, I think also the amount of like learning quality increases as well. So there are a couple to do this as like an EA group leader. Firstly is to just remove as much friction as you can from the events you're giving. And by friction, I mean just like things that aren't part of the learning. It should be really obvious what like Zoom link people should click and what exercise they should do and what reading they should do. But like then they can spend as much effort as possible on like hard reading and hard exercises and like actually get loads of benefit from the event. Another, which I'm really failing to do right now, is avoiding lecturing in favor of like active participation. Hopefully I'm being quick enough that we can have loads of time for that at the end of the session. The third is that people kind of get a lot of benefit from committing to an event in a very serious way. So the fellowship and like other fellowships that we kind of copied for this does this a lot, where we have like applications and people dedicate to a good chunk of time, and it feels like a really serious thing. And that means people can take it seriously and kind of spend more effort when doing the learning. So the fourth tip I have here is that it helps to be really kind of targeted about what we actually will learn. I find it really much easier to learn one thing at a time and really small things. So the curriculum of the Indepth Fellowship, I like to keep like pretty tight on like what the learning objectives actually are each week. So a good example maybe is that Let's Get Together and Talk About Careers is a useful learning event. Let's Get Together and Plan Our Careers is an even more like targeted and more useful learning event. And then Let's Get Together and Talk About This Particular Consideration in Careers is even more targeted and even more useful. So now I'll just go into a bunch of examples as quickly as possible about like how people might actually do learning events. And there's links in the Google Doc that's attached for like, tips about how to run these particular events. So first, I've been going on about it loads, the Oxford Indepth Fellowship. Like I said, it's a 7-week curriculum. It uses resources from EA researchers, so it's not reinventing the wheel. It uses exercises and discussion groups to get effortful learning. And there's this next step week, which is like targeted and like solve this like doing rather than thinking problem. This is time for a final plug. Definitely worth looking into it if you're interested in learning more. Introductory Fellowships are logistically really similar to Indepth Fellowships. It's using the same model. So it's like, yeah, great for all the same reasons, and they're targeted at people who are new to EA, so that they can like learn the basics. And there are a few different types of fellowships from like various different groups. And I've linked to the page on the EA Hub that gives like a guide about this. Concepts workshops are just like another type of learning event. EA Oxford runs 6-hour workshops on like key EA principles. I think this is really high fidelity because people can like ask questions in the moment, and like find out more just from in like a really small group. It's really active learning because, like I said, people are asking questions and they're doing exercises, and it's just like, yeah, really intense for 6 hours. But like one caveat is that it's shorter than a fellowship. So this means it's like more efficient in time for some people, but it means they can't like kind of let the ideas stick and spend more effort like learning this thing. Another type of event that you guys might have heard of is like a one-to-one with a group member. I think this is really high fidelity because you're just talking to one person and they see the questions that are like on their mind, and they give you the misconceptions they might be like worried about. It's also really active because two people are in a conversation and like can't really just sit and listen. But sometimes it's like hard to follow up, so it's harder to like to find next steps. And that's something that maybe people really need to focus on when running these. One note here, and maybe for like all of the events I'm talking about, these can be like really stressful for people who are new to EA to like give this event or run this event. But like it's easy to fall back on like signposting resources if you're like not confident with giving the arguments. And then maybe once you hit and go beyond this like 100-hour kind of guideline for learning about EA, you can be like more confident like teaching some of the things that you've already learned and like passing people on to things that you feel like unsure about. So another like class of things is just like consuming EA content that exists and then talking about it as a group. This is great because it's like not reinventing the wheel. All this stuff already exists and has been written by people who've been like thinking really hard about how to give the arguments. I think like, books by Will MacAskill and Toby Ord are like really, well written and well considered, and they've spent a lot of time on them. And podcasts, 80K podcasts and EAG talks are just like selected and curated by the people who run them. So like, looking on 80K in the CA YouTube channel is a great place to find things. This is a little bit less active because people are just listening to things, and that's where the group work comes in. You can like design questions and talk about it as a group and maybe get more like active learning in that way. A final kind of good example is the 80,000 hours key ideas page. It's just like a really high fidelity introduction to effective altruism, probably the best one online at the moment. And it's closely tied to like applications for people because it's 80,000 hours and that's what they're thinking about. So I think this is, a great example. Finally, a bad example for learning, but a great example for like community building is like an EA group social. Like I said, it's great for building the community and like making like a friendly group, which is like really important. But for learning, it's like kind of undirected and not like targeted at that specific thing. So you might miss some points. And like the sources are secondhand. It's just like people talking about things. So things can get like a bit garbled. I definitely don't give my best summary of like EA ideas in a pub social after a couple of drinks. So I definitely wouldn't recommend it to anyone else. It's worth saying for this example that some groups just like don't have the capacity to do like two different kinds of events. And if that's the case, I think it definitely makes sense to do something like this and like try and combine this. But I think, it's worth thinking about how you're going to do this because like I said at the start of the talk, I think learning about EA is like really important and really hard. And so you need to be like really focused in how you kind of, solve that problem. I've been going really fast. We actually have like 10 minutes to talk at the end, which is great. So I'll put everyone in breakout rooms and you guys can like discuss like one thing you've learned from the workshop and one way it'll like change how you act. Let's practice what we preach. And you can share thoughts in the Google Doc that I sent to everyone. And I'll maybe just drop a sharing link in the chat now so people can get it up before the breakout rooms. And then, you guys can like write all of this down. I'll maybe like comment on the doc and maybe we can come back at the end and send some things in the Zoom chat and see what we can organize. Cool. I will just paste the link and then start setting up breakout rooms. Cool. Those breakout rooms should be popping up for you guys now, so you can head to those whenever. Cool. I see people rolling in from breakout rooms now. Yeah, I hope you guys had some great discussions. Maybe and just after the workshop finishes, you can add some notes into the doc so we can like comment and carry on talking about this. And maybe like if you're not in the EAG or the Student Summit Slack channel for like group organizers, you can join it and have more conversations there as well. Thanks you guys for coming. Hopefully I'll see you guys around in the summit. Bye.
Bye, Will. Thank you.